Welcome, everyone. My name, as Ruth said, is Gee Ranasinha. I'll skip the intro, and I'll put the intro at the end. And I've put the intro at the end because of something called the peak end rule. So it's something we can think about and keep you in suspense till the end of the presentation, keep you awake. So what I'm going to do over the next 40, 45, 50 minutes, who quite knows, is I'm going to give a brief outline as to my basic argument of why I think marketing is in a very bad place at the moment. It's not unbelievable to say it's pretty screwed at the moment. Can I say that? Is that allowed? Well, I did. So, okay, well, that's one pass. I can't do any more. So if you're interested in discussing any of the topics that I'm going to talk about, and you feel bashful about asking these things in the Q&A, please find me. I'm here all day. I'm here for the event evening soiree as well. So please find me, tap me on the shoulder, and we can discuss any of these topics in more detail, preferably while holding an adult beverage. So, it's not working, is it? Nothing is working. Email responses are down. Nobody picks up the phone. Web traffic has fallen off a cliff. Social gets no engagement. And 80% of our ads are viewed by bots. Brands have stopped growing. Today, there are more businesses than ever, more aggressive targets than ever, more competition than ever, more content than ever. And I think we're coming to an impasse here. We don't know what we're doing. No, that means, what I mean to say is we don't know what we're doing wrong. This year, 2025, is projected to have the highest budget for marketing-related activities ever. For everything to do with marketing, advertising, email, sponsorships, PR, production, all of that stuff, we're set to break $1.7 trillion. $1.7 trillion, right? And yet, there's plenty of empirical evidence that shows what we're doing continues to be less effective and more disliked by our audiences. And what's the result of all of this? The result of all of this is 86% of marketing output isn't remembered. The result is generic, vanilla, annoying messaging. The result is tracking scripts and remarketing tags and cookies. The result is GDPR and CCPA and PIPL and DSG and all of these other acronyms. The result is 2 billion people installing an ad blocker in their web browser. So what we thought we'd do as marketers, because that's what worked in the past, is we thought, I know, let's throw some technology at it. That's sure to work. It's worked in the past. We thought the solution to our problem was in technology. But that's clearly not the case, especially for some reason, for digital, for online, where for some reason we've decided to set the bar of quality lower than whatever we're doing on another channel. I don't quite understand why that would be. So we have all of these tools, all of this Mautic, custom audience profiles and UTM codes and geolocation and all of this great stuff. AI, of course, and yet the effectiveness of our marketing continues to fall. So why is this? Well, I think there's many reasons, but I think one of the reasons is because we're playing it safe. We're producing bland, superficial, instantly forgettable messaging. Messaging that's rational and pragmatic, but stuff that isn't recalled. There's too much salesmanship, you know, product shots, features, benefits, bullet points, all that stuff. And there's nowhere near enough showmanship. Characters, stories, emotion. We're not creating the durable memory structures in the brains of our target buyers. And we need to do that for them to remember who we are at the point of purchase. Creating those memory structures is vital because the emotional component is what creates memories over the medium to long term. And for some reason, we're not doing this. Thinking in a digital-centric, a digital exclusive mindset has trained us to chase short-term metrics at the expense of longer-term brand building. But it's emotion that builds brand awareness over time and shifts behavior. As marketers, I think we need to push back. We need to stop listening to vendors who tell us this is how you should be doing your marketing, which just so coincidentally overlays with exactly how that vendor's marketing system works, right? Smells a bit fishy to me, doesn't it to you? We need to fight for emotional storytelling over rational feature dumps, to blend marketing science with creativity and with salience. Because when marketing works, it does something really, really cool, really magical. Okay, it doesn't just grow a business. It creates GDP out of thin air. It takes a 25 pence generic can of soft drink and elevates it into a £3 can of luxury product. If you live in a city, they say that we're exposed to, well, the last numbers I saw were 1,200, but let's round it down to be pessimistic. We're exposed to over 1,000 marketing messages per day. Okay, that's across everything: TV, radio, billboards, websites, pop-ups, banner ads, bus shelters, out of home generally. Okay, so how many people do we have in the room, Ruth? About 60? 65. So this is the audience participation part of the presentation, but don't worry, I'm not going to ask you anything. You don't have to answer. All you have to do is raise your hand. Okay, is that okay? Good. Okay, so we have 65 people in the room. Please tell me, 65 people in the room, can you think of a marketing message that you were exposed to in the last 24 hours that you can remember? I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 people. Thank you. Wasn't too painful, was it? Great. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is a problem. We have 65 people in the room. That's 65,000 messages. And we can remember 15. Great odds, right? Superb. You're better off putting your money in the lottery, I think. That, in essence, is the problem. Because where I think we're going wrong is we think marketing has changed. But it really hasn't. Sure, the tactics have changed. Tactics always change. Tactics change hourly, right? They always change. But marketing hasn't changed because the psychological and emotional drivers that form the basic structures of how human beings decide to buy things hasn't changed. The challenge of understanding our buyers, the strategic questions of target, position, and objective haven't really changed much in the last 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 500 years, 5,000 years. We haven't changed. Read Bill Bernbach's paper about the changing man. Google it, or ChatGPT it if you want, but they'll tell you more about that. Also, related to that, people haven't changed. The way we buy hasn't changed. Or maybe what I should say is the why we buy hasn't changed. Because whether you're in B2B or B2C, whether you're selling something for £5, £50, £500, £50,000, £50 million, the way that we buy hasn't changed. We buy from here. We buy from our left nipple. No, we buy from here. We buy from the heart. We buy from the heart. We buy emotionally. And then we post-rationalize logically. We tell ourselves a story to convince ourselves that what we bought was the right thing to buy. And this is why our marketing needs to be in two halves, because we need to have that emotional component to trigger our interest in the product or service or brand. And then we need the pragmatic, rational bullet point component, which is the narrative we tell ourselves that tips us over the edge and hopefully buys. So many marketers, maybe even in this room, will say, gee, the world has changed, boomer. It isn't like that anymore. Luddite. They'll say that digitally centric marketing techniques such as individual targeting and personalization has made the old analog-based thinking redundant. And it's true that while we have more and more ways of getting in front of our new and existing customers, clearly we're making a dog's dinner of it, because otherwise we'd be walking down the corridor high-fiving each other, looking at fantastic conversion rates and revenue growth over and outside our industry category. But we're not doing that, are we? We're crying into our beer. It's all going wrong. And that's because of our technology-centric marketing tools, our logical and rational marketing brains are ignoring the irrational, emotional components that we as customers rely upon when we're making buying decisions. We've created a data-driven, repeatable, and measurable process, yes, but it's one that's devoid of any sorts of creativity or emotion or resonance. And then we moan that our marketing doesn't work. Right? Today's marketing is too transactional. It lacks depth, it lacks nuance, it's less self-aware, it's less self-reverential, and it calls upon far fewer cultural memes, cultural references. Instead of getting to deliver an emotional reaction intended to charm, to captivate, to inform, to entertain, we're taking the point of literalism. And I'm sure that everybody in this room can empathize with this. Think about a very strong memory that you've had in your life. It can be recently, it can be when you were kids, okay? Think of that memory, okay? I'll bet you anything that that memory is wrapped up in an emotion. Now, it can be a positive emotion, it can be a negative emotion. It could be happiness, joy, sadness, grief, fear, anger, doesn't matter. But the biggest reason why that memory is still in there is because of the emotion that you felt at the time, which anchors it into your brain. Do you see? And now think about the marketing that we're doing and the lack of any nuance, emotion to anchor that memory in our brain. What we're doing as businesses is we're focusing around efficiency metrics. The problem when you focus around efficiency metrics is there's no scope for standing out, for creating differentiation or distinctiveness within your category. So what happens is you take two competitors in the same category and you look at their marketing output, right? If you covered up the logos of each one of those competitors, I'll bet you could exchange the messaging between them. There's no differentiation. There's no distinctiveness within the category. We're drowning in a sea of sameness. So of course, when customers are looking for a solution to the problem they have, they can't remember us because we look like everybody else. So as businesses, I think we're too focused on efficiency and not focused enough on effectiveness. So efficiency, effectiveness. What do I mean by those things? Okay, so my definition. Effectiveness is about how well we're doing in achieving a goal, okay? How successful we are in achieving what we set out to do. Chasing effectiveness means we're about maximizing the outcome to a particular marketing tactic or set of tactics or campaign, okay? It's about achieving the biggest possible success that we can. Efficiency, on the other hand, is a ratio. Efficiency is about how much input we make to deliver a particular output. Now, since efficiency is a ratio between input and output, if we're looking to maximize efficiency, what we need to do is reduce our input while maintaining output. In other words, do the same for less, right? Efficiency-driven businesses are not looking to get the best possible result. They're looking to get the most positive result from the least amount of input or investment. And that's a very different thing. And I think one of the reasons why so many marketers avoid effectiveness and go down the efficiency route is because effectiveness means accountability, right? But if you go down the efficiency route, it's almost much more fun to spend somebody else's money and do some crazy stuff. And if it all goes wrong, not get the blame, because I'm going to say, hey, boss, I did what the software told us. I was just looking at the numbers, you know? I was only following orders. So this is why I say that the biggest marketing advances in 2026 and beyond will be technological rather than psychological. Because I think we should stop asking ourselves, how does Instagram work? How does the LinkedIn algorithm work? How does ChatGPT work? We should be asking ourselves, how do customers work? How does the human mind work? Now, to do that requires some self-awareness, sure, but also the acknowledgement that we need to question our existing processes and assumptions. Here's a quote from an American neuroscientist by David Eagleman. We don't think the way we think we think. Okay? We like to think as individuals that we are rational and independent and logical, but in the real world, that just isn't true. Because most of businesses is logical and rational. Businesses think that marketing should be logical and rational. Yet science and research has shown us that emotional and irrationality is what gets us remembered and what initiates a call to action, which gets us onto the subject of behavioral science. The issue is that marketers and business in general are trying to apply rationality, engineering, logic, pragmatic type thought, which works in other parts of the business, like engineering, manufacturing, certainly finance, and trying to apply it to marketing. But we can't do that in marketing. It doesn't work like that in marketing. It never has, and it never will. What's missing is our implicit and fundamental understanding of human behavior. Now, some people call this behavioral economics. Some people call it behavioral science. But at the end of the day, it's customer psychology, right? It's the understanding of behavior in context. Context is the important word there, because context affects our decision-making to a far greater degree than even we consciously will admit to. So we need to understand the power of the parts of the brain that influence decision-making, as well as the internal and external factors that govern these parts of the brain. Because if we better understand these areas, we have a better chance of creating an environment which is conducive to decision-making. Okay? So, what is behavioral science? Behavioral science looks into the details of how and why people make decisions as opposed to how they think they make decisions, because it recognizes that we often act through cognitive biases, mental shortcuts called heuristics, as well as the environmental, the contextual component. So we're not talking about purely rational analysis. For example, if I said to you, buy one, get one free, it would give you one image in your brain. But if I said 50% off, it would give you another perception in your brain. Different perceptions, okay? An anchoring bias. You're walking down the street and you see a jacket in the window, and the sales ticket on the window says jacket £249. And you think, £249, right? But if that sales ticket said jacket was £400, now £249, makes you think of it in a different way, right? I'm not saying positive or negative. I'm saying it makes you think of it in a different way. Okay, that's called an anchoring bias. It's one of these cognitive biases that we're talking about. Ice cream is a good one, actually. Ice cream sales, if you look at the data, ice cream sales, you sell more ice cream on a sunny day than you do on a rainy day, even if the ambient temperature is exactly the same, right? There's also a limit for ice cream sales on a particular day. If the day's too hot, ice cream sales fall. We can talk about that afterwards if you want, okay? So behavioral science, the way I like to describe it, is it's a marketing cheat code, all right? If you're an old school gamer, you'll know up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A, start, right? It was a Konami code, it was called. And when you did that, you got like unlimited health, unlimited lives. If you're playing Doom, you got the BFG on level 1 and all that sort of stuff. Behavioral science is like a marketing cheat code for the brain. It tells us how and why people are making buying decisions, so we can reframe and re-articulate, our marketing messaging conducive to buying decisions. Have you heard of left brain and right brain people, right? Left brain people are better at maths and right brain people are better at learning a musical instrument. It was thought, well, the human brain is divided into two halves, two hemispheres. And it used to be thought that the left hemisphere was solely focused on logic and rationality and pragmatism and technicalities and that sort of thing. And it is, but not exclusively. Also, the right-hand side of the brain was focused on more creative, interpretive, intuitive type thought processes. Again, that's not untrue, but it's not exclusive. We realized this in about 1960. Somebody actually said, you know what, it's actually total rubbish. The location of the various parts of the brain are not exclusively located in one hemisphere or the other. Apparently, understanding brain physiology is actually more complicated than we thought. I mean, who'd have thunk? I mean, I thought it'd be easy. I thought it'd be simple. All you needed was an IKEA instruction sheet, but apparently not. Apparently it's a bit more complicated than that. So what we did, to make ourselves sound like we know what we're talking about, we changed the name. Right, rebranding, right? That's what marketers do. So instead of talking about left brain, right brain, we now talk about system 1 and system 2 thinking, okay? Because it's quite useful to talk about these two different ways of thinking. But instead of calling them left brain, right brain, we have two distinct modes of cognitive processing, okay? It was popularized, the system 1, system 2 stuff was popularized by a gentleman by the name of Daniel Kahneman with his partner Avos Tversky in the 80s. Daniel Kahneman, he's the Nobel laureate. He wrote his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. Great book, Behavioral Science Bible, if you want to take it. It is heavy reading, I will warn you. It's like the father of behavioral science. So what is system 1, system 2 thinking? So system 2 thinking is analytical, logical, concerned with details. It's quite slow, it's quite deliberate, it's very conscious, and it requires intentional effort. You know, when you're working on a project and you get mentally fatigued, that's because you're using a lot of system 2 type thinking. You're learning, you're consciously working on a problem or a task, okay? System 1, on the other hand, is very different. It understands the world through emotions, intuition, relationships. It's fast, it's automatic, it's intuitive. And the key thing is it operates with little or no effort, because from an evolutionary biological perspective, that's the point of the brain. The brain tries to shovel off as much decision-making as it can over to system 1. And that's because it uses less effort. It doesn't want to make effort. It wants to make things effortless. By effortless, I don't mean effortless, right? I mean without effort. Because for the average adult, the human brain is about 2% of our body weight, but it uses up to 26% of the calorific output of the body. So it makes sense to shovel this stuff off, to be automatic and intuitive, rather than concentrate on stuff, okay? But what we have with marketing today is a system 2-centric, single directions communication ideology that totally ignores system 1 engagement. But it's system 1 that understands empathy, irony, humor, and all the other emotional traits that are necessarily considered for long-term brand building. Effective marketing is about system 1 and system 2 together, but most marketers are ignoring system 1 and then wondering why their marketing fails to deliver. So I mentioned cognitive biases just before, and I just want to give a couple of examples. Number one example is called the framing effect. So the framing effect describes how we can be influenced by the interpretation of a piece of information depending on how it's presented to us, okay? And this came out from 1981 by a very famous experiment done by Daniel Kahneman and Avos Tversky, where they got two groups of people and they told them this story. They said, okay, 600 people have got a fatal disease. They are going to die. And you need to recommend one or other forms of treatment, okay? Treatment A will save 200 lives. Treatment B has a 33% chance of saving everyone or a 66% chance of saving nobody. Now, for the mathematicians in the audience, you'll quite quickly be able to tell me that they're both the same. The outcomes are exactly the same. Yet, 72% of people went with treatment A. Well, come on, who doesn't want to be responsible for saving 200 lives? Right? Who doesn't want to look like a hero? So then they repeated the experiment, but they changed the framing. So instead of saying treatment A will save 200 lives, they said treatment A would lose 400 lives. Same thing, just presented in a different way. And this time, when they asked everybody, 78% of people went with treatment B. That is the power of context over content. Do you like the wine? Do you like that? Yeah? This is about priming. Often called associative priming, or actually semantic priming. If you're in consumer psychology, it's known as musical fit. This was a UK piece of research where they cordoned off the wine section of a supermarket. And what they did for a month, they had exclusive access, and what they did is they put some speakers in the wine section. And for 2 weeks, they played stereotypical French music. I mean, really stereotypical, bordering on offensive French music. I mean, it's accordions and berets and Breton shirts and baguettes and hello, hello, and Emily in Paris and all that sort of stuff, all right? But there wasn't any point of sale stuff. There wasn't like French season offer on pricing, nothing. Just had music playing in the background, okay? Then, for another 2 weeks, they changed the French music and they put German music. Again, really, really, really quasi-offensive, not Rammstein, right? But really like Umpa, Lederhosen, Bratwurst, that sort of German music, okay? No offense to the German contingent in our audience, please, okay? And then what they did is they looked at the sales against having no music. And what they found is for the 2 weeks where they had this subliminal French music playing, well, not subliminal, it was there, it was in the background. The sales of French wine went up 400%. And the German one, it went up as well. Okay, only 84%, but that's not saying anything about German wine, right? Maybe they got the wrong wines, okay? But it was still a serious uptick. But what's interesting is when they asked people who were leaving the supermarket and they looked in their bag and said, oh, you bought some wine. Can I ask you, why did you buy the French wine? Why did you buy the German wine? You know, you could have bought Argentinian, Chilean, South African, Australian, right? Why? And they came up with various reasons. Oh, well, I was asked to get this bottle of wine, or the recipe called for this particular one, or I've known this particular wine, I really like, whatever, okay? And then they asked them, so the music didn't have any impact? We were playing French music in the background. Did that have any influence on you choosing French wine or German wine? And every single person answered in the same way. They all said, music? What music? Now, there's a number of possibilities for what the answer is. It could be they simply did not hear the music and it was a total subconscious influence. Or it could be that they were too embarrassed to take to the researcher, you know what, I'm so gullible, I bought French wine because I was hearing French music in the background. It could have been either reason. It could be another reason. But the point is, priming works. Last example here is concrete expressions. What do I mean by concrete expressions? And actually, concrete expressions is particularly important to people who are creating text content for new and existing buyers. People like, I don't know, people in this room, maybe, who knows? Okay, and it's an importance of using tangible, visualizable words and phrases, okay? So this all came about by a very famous experiment done in 1972 by a psychologist by the name of Dr. Ian Begg, but has been repeated many, many times, and the results still hold true. And what he did is he got a couple of groups of people, and he said, here's a list of words. I want you to remember as many words on this list as you can. And what he did is the list of words was consisting of two different types. 50% of the words were tangible, easy to visualize type words, things like white horse, red door, black cat, smiling baby, these sorts of things, okay? And the other 50% were abstract. They were words which were intangible to visualize. Things like wholesome nutrition, or impossible amount, or innovative quality. Things that are hard to actually visualize, okay? And what happened? They asked these two groups of people, can you write down every single word that was on that list, as many as you can? And the number of words that were able to be recalled that were tangible were 4 times greater than the words which were intangible. So Ian Begg reckons that visual is our strongest sense, and not my visual as in like ocular, but in terms of visualization, because it creates an emotional output and it reinforces those memory structures, okay? But this is the sort of thing that brands do all the time. We talk about these intangible qualities because we want to sound important and sound like, hey, we know more than you do, right? So we talk about things like quality and performance and refreshment and trustworthiness and premium and all of this stuff, which nobody remembers. It's instantly forgotten because you can't visualize it. It is intangible, okay? So I think the way we sell needs to evolve. We think we understand customers, but I don't think we really do. Because many times we're either listening too close or we're listening for the wrong things that just reaffirm what we thought in the first place. Confirmation bias, okay? We need to better understand how customers think, how they make decisions, and the contextual and emotional levers that act as variables that affect the final result. So, to summarize, what we're doing isn't working. Or if it is working, it's working nowhere near to the potential that it used to, or that it could do. Technology is an arms race, okay? We've all got the same technical capabilities. It's not about the tools, right? If I bought 1,000 pounds of Japanese steak knives, chef's knives, doesn't make me Gordon Ramsay, does it? Right? I could spend 20 grand on a Hasselblad camera. I'm not going to be Annie Leibovitz tomorrow. Right? It's not about the tools. We can't keep producing this generic, vanilla, soulless marketing that looks like everyone else, isn't remembered or recollected by in-market prospects. We need to add some system 1 into our system 2 type thinking. And on that, I'll leave you with a quote by a neuroanatomist by the name of Jill Bolt Taylor. And she says, we like to think that we are thinking creatures that feel. But in fact, we are feeling creatures that think. So, as I said at the beginning, for those of you who are still paying attention, the peak end rule. The peak end rule is about people remembering an experience based on its most intense point and its end point. Hence, me telling you about me at the end. So, I am Gee Ranasinha, as I was at the beginning of this presentation. And I run a marketing agency that uses behavioral science thinking to create more effective marketing. And I've been doing that for 18 years. We're 19 people in 9 countries. Most of our business comes out of the US for some reason. Don't know why. There's this thing called the interwebs. I don't know if you've heard of it, but apparently it really works. I'm also a conference and event speaker, so Mautic partners, Mautic sponsors. If you like what you hear and want to have a chat, I'm available all day. And talking of chats, I shall yield to my co-host, who will see whether there are any questions. and hopefully there'll be some questions from the floor. So don't be bashful. We're all friends here. Who's going to be the first person to ask a question on the first session of the first day
All right,
of the conference?
Who's going to make me run around the room the most?
How do you approach the ethical considerations around psychological manipulation?
I wouldn't call it manipulation, sir. I think manipulation is something different. I think manipulation is certainly crossing the line.
But that's the road you go down, isn't it?
I'm not so sure, because we're not trying to persuade anyone, right? I think we use the term persuasion and influence and use them exchangeably, right? And for me, there's a very different context to those two words, okay? I think influence is giving people appropriate information to help them make a decision, because they're making the decision, right? While persuasion, I see as coercion. I see persuasion as you have a particular point of view, and I'm trying to push my point of view onto you. And I'm using maybe nefarious ways of doing that. So that's why I see there's a clear line of differentiation between what we're trying to do. All we're trying to do is give buyers the information that they are looking for to help them make a more informed choice. Because quite often, their choices are based upon irrational past experience, which may not totally represent. Because what do we do as buyers, okay? Our biggest fear is buying a lemon, right? So we're looking for reassurance. Now, we can get that from social proof, right? People like you also bought this, or people like you bought all this other stuff, right? We can look at that. We can look at it from influencer marketing, right? People who you can better identify. It may be sort of confirmation bias. You see yourself, you appreciate their particular point of view, their values, their aspirations. You align with those aspirations. And so you take their recommendations as being truthful. Or, you know, let's go 36,000 feet. We can think about it as brand. Okay, why do we buy one brand over another? Is it purely about features and bullet points and all the rest of it? Of course not, right? If you buy a phone with a fruity logo on it, right, there's nothing that you can't do with a phone that doesn't have a fruity logo on it. You're just spending the price of a laptop on a phone. And there are plenty of people who do that, because it says more about you to somebody else than it does about the brand. So that's why I say it's not manipulation, it's influence. Did you buy that? Okay. See, I influenced you, I didn't persuade you.
I have a question about the really nice example that you gave about priming.
Yes.
So what did they do with the outcome?
It was a scientific experiment. So as you know, in academia, nobody has to prove anything. As long as they get their tenure, they don't really care, do they? Sorry. Damning observation on our academic system. No. It's a proof of concept that there are unconscious influences that can significantly impact a decision outside of what a buyer is making and from a conscious perspective. So in this case, it was having music in the background. But in your case, with your customers, in your category, in your industry, you know, unless you're selling wine or something which is like physical availability, it may be something totally different. The point is, it's to illustrate the example that there are other influences going on that positively or negatively affect the perception of our brand, product, or service. And to understand, to be aware of it, to acknowledge it is one thing, but it's also to be able to optimize an environment so that when a customer is in market, which is not all the time, there's only a tiny sliver window of opportunity when they are in the market, that we are one of the people that are being considered. That's all we can do as marketers, right? All we can do as marketers is be front of mind when a customer is ready to buy and is deciding which one to buy, and we are on that list of consideration. That's all we can do, right? We want to be on that list, because once they've made that choice and that on that list, trying to get on that list is pretty much impossible. Is a tiny percentage of trying to get on there. So all we can do is be aware, made aware at that point of consideration. So the point of the experiment is to illustrate the outside effects that influence a buying decision. So answer your question?
Yeah, but it's a pity though, because
I'm sorry?
it's a pity though, because I was thinking like a marketing manager or a CMO, like, okay, what can we do with this? You know, because otherwise it's just like, okay, cool experiment. And now what? You know?
Well, and now what? Well, the first thing that and now is realizing, you know what? There's other things going on. People aren't just looking at bullet points and making a decision, and acknowledging that and being comfortable with that. To be honest, that's the hardest thing, right? Once you've done that, the acknowledgement that there are other things going on, there are other things that are being considered outside of the features and benefits and use cases of a product. But concretely, how that applies to your particular business is going to be totally different to how it applies to your particular business or anybody else's, right?
I think what I maybe am saying is that there are like a lot of really cool experiments how the brain works, and that when you want to like really get it into practice, and maybe get a good revenue from it. It usually, well, a lot of times it ends there. So it's like, okay, cool, but we can't, we can't do the whole year 2 weeks French music, then German, then we go for Italian, then we go for South African music.
But yeah, but that's a tactical endpoint, right? So the strategy dictates the tactics. So if our strategy is to sell more French wine, then we use the appropriate tactics. And maybe this is one tactical thing that wasn't on the list. We thought we'd like drop price or increase range or have somebody wearing a beret in the supermarket and, with a funny moustache and a baguette in their hand or something, whatever it may be. But, all of these things follow in order, right? We have to start with diagnosis, and then we go on to strategy, and then we go on to tactics. And it has to be in that order, and we have to spend, broadly speaking, the same amount of time on each. But also, they're not additive; they're multiplicative. So even if you have the greatest tactics in the world, if you screwed up your diagnosis, it doesn't matter what you do afterwards, because anything multiplied by 0 is 0, right? So once we know what our strategy is, what our objectives are, we'll then form what the tactical engagement might look like. And that'll be based upon customer research, segmentation, targeting, positioning, all the usual stuff. Thank you for your question. Any other questions?
Oh, all the way back there. Ooh. There we go. Mine's about framing.
Yes.
In a world where so much of everything is visible all of the time, as you pointed out with your advert example earlier on, is there as much chance of upsetting someone with something that for somebody else would frame it in a positive light? How do marketers deal with that? Because if it could be that one message could tick the box for somebody and create a really negative frame for someone else.
Absolutely,
how would
yeah.
we know that? So what does behavioural science say about that?
Not everybody is our target customer. So all we do is identify our ICP, our ideal customer profile, and then based upon the research we have with that, we build the strategic the strategic side is then built for the tactical execution at the other end.
I think I meant in a more kind of, if it had a really negative impact.
Oh, okay.
So I think what I'm discovering now is I think that's why people feel quite muted, because they're worried if they're going to upset somebody. If they say something,
No, I think you're right.
type, it might
Yes.
be misconstrued.
Yes, especially
Literally
nowadays, I
words
think.
mean different things, or the same word
Yes.
means different things to different generations or different cultures.
Absolutely.
So how
Totally
do we
agree.
deal with that?
Yeah.
The extreme edges of that. I mean, an ICP is a sort of limited target. That's a tangible thing, but putting that in the context of the whole, negative framing seems a bad thing.
No, I totally agree with you. But I think you can never be all things to all people. You have to create some kind of positioning based around a profile of customer in order to stop seeming generic and vanilla and all the things that we've been talking about as well. Now, there's nothing to say that we can't create multiple ICPs, right? And quite often we do that, right? There's a product which has a specific use case for this particular ICP, which is different to another, and you create multiple campaigns. Because what you should never do, obviously, is create a campaign which has multiple messages because you think you're saving money, right? Because the resonance, the stickiness of those messages drops like exponentially as soon as you put multiple messaging. If you've got 3 messages, then you do 3 campaigns. And it's very specific use cases, very clear. So that particular ICP that you're going for identifies with the way that you're positioned in articulating your value proposition. Yeah.
But my only other, I was hoping you were going to mention rage bait, because the other other side of it then is leaning into the negative framing. Is that something that you guys are finding is working, or is anybody pushing these avenues of that?
I think there are extremes of positioning that work for particular ICPs, and there are plenty of brands that I think we know. Liquid Death, for example, right, stands out as a brand which is very distinct and is quite happy to break the mold of convention for the brand category. But from your perspective, pushing it to that next level degree, that isn't something that we've found happen from the client engagements that we've worked. But I think it is something that's growing and something that is going to be more and more prevalent. And having an answer to that kind of position is going to be something that's going to be more and more necessary as part of somebody's redundancy plan. Any other questions? I'm quite happy that we've got so many questions for the first session, so this is good.
I also have a question. You mentioned in the beginning of your speech, you mentioned ad blockers, right? So I remember the time when there were no ad blockers and we were quite happy. And we thought that, oh my God, this is printing unlimited money because we can use cookies and we know everything about you.
Yeah.
This is where marketing ends and the ad blockers came. And now we are living in a different world. For a couple of years, ChatGPT comes and filters stuff what we see. And do you think that in the near future it will be like, hey, you being, taken advantage of, don't buy this product because it's playing on this and this biases? Like, my question is actually, how long do you think that we can go down this road before we have to market stuff like, hey, this is what it does, and ask AI if it's really good, and if it is, then buy it?
I think it's something we need to, thank you for your question. I think it's something that we need to think about, but I don't think it's something that consumers think about today, right? I mean, if you just need to see the, albeit extremely exponential growth of LLMs, but then you sort of see the dominance of Google, it's still doing like 86 trillion searches a year or something, right? Look at any of the LLM companies, they're all spending money like it's going out of fashion, and none of them are making anything, right? They're losing money hand over fist. Even some of the big guys are saying they're using the B word, it's a bubble. Now, that's not to say that it's going to go away, right? It's not like, 3D TVs. Remember them? right? Oh, 3D TVs, yes. NFTs, that's where it's going. Crypto, yes. Okay, it's not going to be that way. But I think, like all of these things, right? We've got the extreme use cases. Look at this video. Look at this, that, and the other. Great. Okay. Show me where it's actually moved the needle. Show me the revenue case where doing this as opposed to doing something else has actually generated a tangible uptick in revenue. Because, you know, at the end of the day, where the rubber hits the road, we're in sales, right? So we've got to sell something. Okay. I think that we'll come to a happy middle, because if you look at the extremes of the modeling at the moment, it's a sinusoidal curve, and it's leveling off now because they're running out of data, right? Because all of these data points are primarily textual, and they need to work out how to be able to interpret non-textual content in order to feed these data models and get to wherever they're going to get to. The subject of agentic comes up, right? Which scares me. There's a great video interview by Meredith, I think this Baxter. She's the CEO of Telegram. She did a fantastic interview a couple of weeks ago, which blasted holes in many of the basic concepts of agentic, because if you're looking at it as a model saying, okay, I'm going to ask an agent to book 5 tickets in a concert and then email my buddies to let them know that the concert's booked and this is where we're going, and send them the messages and book it in their diaries and all that sort of stuff, right? So that means giving admin access to your browser, means giving them access to your logins and passwords, right? Giving them your credit card number, right? Giving them maybe mum's maiden name and those sorts of things in there as well. Maybe access to your password,
Password manager.
The password manager, or I was thinking about the the number that changes every 30 seconds. The
Two-factor authentication.
okay, thank you. The 2FA, giving them access to that, communicating that across agents, which at the moment is in clear text because there isn't an encryption protocol for all of this stuff. And as an industry, we spent the last 30 years trying to kick out bots, right? And so now we're going to say, oh, no, come in. What could possibly go wrong, right? So I think there's a number of other questions we need to answer well before it gets down to a use case, whereas a person who's not in marketing, I call them civilians, right? Whereas a civilian can actually interact with whatever this entity is in a way that actually benefits their lives and doesn't create a tsunami of security issues. Does that answer your question?
I think we have time for one more. Does anyone else have any more questions? No? I'll just come and check and see if there's any online. We had several people joining us online, some from Guernsey. Some people from across the UK as well.
Never been to Guernsey. Invite me to Guernsey.
Apparently it's raining there too. No, we don't have any questions from online. So Thank you so much, Gee. That was such a great session and really great questions as well. So do come and chat with Gee. He'll be around most of the day.
Please do.
Can we give him a big hand? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.